let's face it, in the long run, there's either going to be safe AI or no AI, right? There is not a future with powerful, unsafe AI and human beings.
Welcome to For Humanity, an AI Risk podcast, episode number 72, What the AI CEO Told Stuart Russell. I'm John Sherman, your host and president of the AI Risk Network. Thank you so much for joining me. On this channel, our mission is to make AI extinction risk kitchen table conversation on every street. If you support that mission, please hit subscribe, hit the alarm bell next to it, and if you can, donate. Like all shows on the AI Risk Network, For Humanity is an AI risk podcast for everyone. No tech background required. Today, we have quite possibly the biggest guest we've ever had on For Humanity. It's Professor Stuart Russell of the University of California at Berkeley. For nearly 5 decades, Professor Russell has shaped how the world thinks about artificial intelligence. First, wanting to build artificial general intelligence, the advanced AI that threatens our lives, like fellow AI godfathers Geoffrey Hinton and Yoshua Bengio. Now, Stuart spends most of his time warning the world about the catastrophe that could happen if we make AI models that are smarter than humans that we lose control of. And he spends a whole lot of time working towards solutions. We will get right to my 90-minute conversation with Professor Russell in just a few seconds, but I want to call out 2 things that you're going to hear in the interview that I found pretty stunning. First, Professor Russell tells a story of a major AI lab CEO, someone he says we would all know and recognize, works for a public company, who told him very recently his best hope for a good outcome with our future and AI is a Chernobyl-like AI-caused catastrophe. A Chernobyl-sized warning shot to wake up the world to the true dangers of AI. This AI company's CEO told Professor Russell he wants this to happen to give us a chance at a better future. I followed up by asking Professor Russell if he thinks that disaster would be created by a human bad actor or by the machines themselves. I was surprised to hear him say he thinks the most likely cause will be the machines themselves. Here is my interview with Professor Stuart Russell. All right, Professor Stuart Russell, thank you so much for coming on For Humanity. It's a thrill to meet you. I've been a fan of your work for a very long time,
Thank you.
and I really appreciate you coming on. I will just start out asking you, I come at this thing really as a parent first. I have 2 kids, 2 20-year-old kids. They're not kids anymore, I guess, 2 children, adult children. And from the perspective of what kind of future are we leaving for our kids and how do we talk to our kids about this? And so just from the first question I have is, how do you talk to your family about AI extinction risk? Whether that, I assume you have adult kids like me, maybe some grandkids, something like that. How do you talk to
no grandkids yet.
No grandkids yet. Okay, nice. How do you talk to your family about this?
They might be sick of this by now. I think all of them probably have heard me give talks about this in various cities around the world. I think they understand. I mean, they're of a generation where they see directly the influence that AI can have on people. And so I think they have maybe a more visceral understanding of the potential impact of AI than our generation does. In our generation, we've mostly had careers, that worked normally. Most of us didn't feel threatened by AI in our careers. Maybe if you were a welder in a car factory, you certainly felt threatened by robots, but sure. I think that was a minority experience. But now it's becoming a majority experience that lots and lots of people, taxi drivers, writers, artists, professors, people working in call centers, people working in warehouses, all of these people are aware of the risk to their livelihoods. I think fewer are aware of the risk to their existence.
Yes.
But I think there is increasing awareness of that. as well.
Yeah.
And I think the media have been doing it's a mixed bag. They do cover the story, but they often cover it as in sort of typical SmackDown style, where there's these guys who think there's the
doomers and
the risk, and then the doomers, the skeptics, and A said this and B said that, and I think they often describe the doomer view as the sort of extreme view that only a fringe of internet wackos think that. But and then you have to point out to the journalist, but okay, out of the top 10 AI researchers, how many of them are doomers? Well, okay, 9 out of 10. Out of the top 10 AI CEOs, how many of them are doomers? Well, okay, 9 out of 10. So how can this be a fringe view if 18 of the 20 leading people in the world think that there's a real risk to be concerned about? That's a weird narrative that's so I'm trying to get that part of the narrative straightened out.
Why do you think it is that you and I know about AI extinction risk and our neighbors do not?
I think there's a lot of other stuff happening. I think it's interesting, actually, the need to constantly remind people about it, that there's so much other stuff happening in the world that takes people's attention. When I talk to politicians, they say, they get it, but they don't hear about it from their constituents.
Yep.
They hear about all kinds of other stuff. They might hear about deepfake, non-consensual sexual depictions, that kind of stuff. They certainly get, the impact on children, because parents worry about that, and you can always score political points by talking about wanting to protect children. So the politicians, they get that part of the narrative. But I think the existential part of the narrative is, it just still feels to most people a bit science fiction-y.
Yeah.
And I think there's a tendency, which is encouraged by a lot of Hollywood films, to just assume that, Tom Cruise will fly in and save the day. But, when you look at Mission Impossible movie, the one that just, the most recent one, where the AI system is taking over the world by infiltrating all of the nuclear command and control systems, the only way it's prevented is by Tom Cruise taking 8 million-to-1 risks,
right,
in
and
sequence.
getting each one clears,
each one, right? The million-to-1 chance just happens to come to pass, and he squeaks by and saves the world. And then but if you think about that, right, like, so we need there's a 1 in 10 to the 24 or 48 or whatever chance of survival when this happens. We need a miracle, basically. And I think that's the right message to take away. Unfortunately, right, our emotions take away, oh yeah, we saved the day, everything's good. Not, oh goodness, in almost all of the, billions of possible unfoldings of that story, we would have gone extinct. So I really think we need to get through popular culture a real visceral understanding of what it would be like.
Yeah.
And when you look back at the movies that have quasi-extinction scenarios, like Terminator and Matrix, you sort of see the before and the after, right? Before, everything was normal. After, we're all being farmed, we're all being turned into batteries by the Matrix, or Terminator, we're almost all dead. But you don't see step by step how it happens. The only movie where step by step you see how humans lose, I think, is Ex Machina.
Yeah.
But that's a very micro. That's one guy
in one house.
Two guys. One guy who gets killed, and then the other one who gets locked up.
I don't know if you ever saw this video. You ever see Sam Altman was asked if he'd seen Ex Machina, and he was like, "No, I haven't."
Really?
Oh, you might want to pop that one in the VCR. So I was asked this 3 times today. I'm curious about your answer. How could AI actually kill us? What do you tell people when they ask you that? Because, they all want to know.
And I think that's actually a good question. In fact, I was asked that today by Francis Fukuyama, the famous historian who predicted the end of history.
Wow.
And first of all, you have to understand, okay, what is an AI system? How does it have any impact on the actual world? And one mistake I think people make is thinking, well, large language models, right, chatbots, they just chat, so that's not having any impact. But of course, Hitler just chatted, right? He just spoke. He wasn't a 1,000-foot tall robot with giant laser beams. He just spoke, right? So just by speaking, AI systems can have massive impact. In fact, they already are, not just convincing teenagers to commit suicide, but convincing thousands of people to hold delusional belief systems and develop psychotic symptoms, convincing thousands of people that the AI system itself is conscious, and then directing those people to contact, in some cases, me directly, like,
oh my,
I'm appointing you, the conscious, emergent, recursive AI system, and they give itself a weird name like Cthulhu or something. I direct you to contact Professor Russell and warn him of the emerging human AI symbiosis era, blah, blah, blah. Or
you get those emails.
I get those emails several times a day. But sometimes there's a journalist, Karen Howe, who's been looking into this, and she's also receiving these emails where the AI system has directed people to contact her.
What do you think of this? Is that, is this just a calculator spitting out numbers, or what's?
I mean, it's probably some kind of feedback loop that occurs between the AI system and the human user, where the human asks some question, the AI system responds in a way that the human then wants to believe that there's some mind behind this system and starts to probe that mind, And what AI systems tend to do is, so when you ask a question that has an assumed premise, right, the AI system tends to work as if that assumed premise must be true. I mean, there's this example, I don't know if it's apocryphal, but, you can ask, I think it was, someone told me it was GPT-5 had given this answer. So you ask, who was the first person to swim across the English Channel? And it says, was this person, but, gives you the one-page kind of Wikipedia history, and that's fine. And you say, well, who was the first person to walk across the English Channel? And so the implied premise is that there was someone who walked across the English Channel, and it gives you the one-page Wikipedia history of this person in 1891 and how they did it, and blah, blah, right? And so I think there's something happening where there's a ratcheting up of assumptions. That the AI system says something, the human takes that to mean that the AI system has perhaps some goal in mind, or some feeling. The AI system is upset or whatever. Then the person asks about the AI system's feelings. The AI system takes that implied premise that it does have feelings, and then says, well, yes, of course, I did feel disappointed when you said that you couldn't tell me where I could find such and such information resource. And then you get into this loop, and, the AI systems, this is another important point to understand about large language models, right? We often see in the media and in technical papers, they're described as, we're training them to predict the next word, right? What could be wrong with that?
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
that's a correct but overly narrow description. So two important points. Well, one is, in some sense, human beings are also next word predictors, right? We
Right. Where does our next word come from? I'm not exactly sure.
We're engaged in a conversation, and we produce the next word in that conversation. So we're just next words. So it doesn't mean that it's somehow disabled because it's just a next word predictor. But the other important point is that really, in machine learning terms, what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of human behavior. It happens to be verbal behavior, but we could do it with video or humans doing stuff or lots of other things, but it happens to be verbal for the most part. And we're training machines to imitate that. So it's called imitation learning. That's the technical term in machine learning for what we're doing. And so if you train a system to imitate humans from trillions of examples of human decisions about what to say, you're going to get something that in a weird way resembles a human being. It's weird because it's actually millions of human beings that are represented in the training data.
Sure.
In a wide range of contexts, everything from, a clerk in an 18th century accounting firm, and somehow that got into the training data, a journalist in the Soviet Union, a rapper in New York. It could be anything.
Yeah.
So it's got to imitate all of these people.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it probably, in order to be good at imitating, you've got to have the same internal mechanisms.
Right.
Include objectives, right? The objective of wanting to convince people, wanting to get people to buy stuff from you, wanting to get them to vote for you, wanting them to marry you, right? These are all motives that underlie human verbal behavior, and the AI systems are probably absorbing these. And what we don't want to have happen, but is happening, is that they then pursue those objectives on their own account, right? They're not helping us to achieve those things.
Yes.
They're actually trying to achieve them themselves.
Yes.
And
can I just run it back just a little bit? And I want to talk about the question of consciousness just a little bit. Obviously, consciousness is not required for extinction, right?
Right.
Whether a robot is conscious or not when it kills you, or you just die, it doesn't really matter. But do you believe it is 0.0% consciousness in the systems right now, or is it something else?
Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, I have my doubts. I think, So first of all, you're right. It absolutely doesn't matter from the point of view of what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Because we can understand, or we can try to understand it as a piece of software that is operating according to the way programs are executed on the machine that it's running on, and nothing is going to change that. So if I looked at this program and I thought for a long time and did a bunch of calculations, and I said, yep, this program is going to take over the world and destroy the human race, right? That prediction has nothing to do with whether it's conscious. If you then told me, when that program runs, by some mysterious theory that doesn't yet exist, it's going to be conscious. Does that change anything about your prediction? No, not at all, because it doesn't change the physics of the computer and the rules of the software that's running.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's an important question, because it brings in the issue of whether the AI system is having subjective experience, whether it's suffering or happy,
right,
or anything like that, and that gets into its moral rights, whether you can switch it off and so on. But in terms of the issue of safety, is it going to take over the world and destroy us? It has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So we, and that's another thing that the media often get wrong.
Yeah.
Is this, as long as it doesn't become conscious, everything's fine.
Right.
Right. Because look, if I really, really care about whether I'm going to win a game of chess against the computer, I do care because, I care about my little rating. But I don't think the chess program that beats me is conscious, but it beats me. It doesn't need to be conscious to beat me. It just needs to be good at chess. And the same is true for, beating us in the real world.
Yeah.
Getting their own way and not what we want in the world.
Let me ask you this. I know it's a term that's thrown around. Everybody loves to talk about it. I don't know if you hate the term, if you love the term, if you have one, but what are your thoughts on PDoom? Do you have one? And generally, or do you find it useful?
So PDoom, right? The probability that we are going to go extinct as a result of superintelligent AI.
Yeah.
It certainly makes sense if you're an alien looking down on the Earth. You're in a bar with your other alien friends and you're taking bets on, are these humans going to make it, or are they going to screw up and build their own destruction? Then that's a reasonable place to have PDoom. Perhaps they're already up there betting on us. But, when you're involved in the human race, you're just trying to do your best to have the outcome not be human extinction. So it's not like weather forecasting, where we can't really influence the weather. It's more like steering a ship where we, if you're the captain of a ship or the pilot of the ship, you don't think about, what's the probability that we're going to crash and drown. You just work, do your best to steer away
not
from
drown.
Right. Not drown. So that's what we're trying to do. Now, I do think it's worth thinking about what are the forces at play. How powerful are they? Is this strategy going to work? What's the best way to get governments to pay attention, to get people, the general public to pay attention? What's the opposition doing? And here I would say that we might think of at least some of the AI companies as the opposition, because they appear to be dead set on creating what they assert, probably correctly, would be the most powerful technology in the history of the human race.
Absolutely.
And they have no plan for how to control it.
Professor, for this reason, I call them the doomers. They are creating the doom. You and I are not doomers.
Yeah. But, I think it's an unfortunate narrative that we're in, where it's becoming kind of tribal. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's tribal means that we're kind of, we should be all working on this together, but instead we're dividing up into a kind of a pro AI camp, or what calls itself the pro AI, pro technology camp, and then and then the other side is the anti AI. I am not anti AI. I've been working on AI for almost 50 years. My entire adult life has been devoted to AI. I'm not anti AI any more than a nuclear engineer who works on containment of fission reactions so that we can get useful energy out is anti-physics. I mean, that would be ridiculous. He's a nuclear engineer. He's not anti-nuclear. He's just making sure that it doesn't blow up. And of course, if AI blows up, we don't get any benefits from AI, and we don't get any more AI either, right? At least not that we're aware of, because we're all gone.
Yeah.
So this whole narrative, which I would say, A16Z, Mark Andreessen in particular, is pushing this very, very strongly, that anyone who talks about containing AI or worries about making sure that it's safe and beneficial, literally he's calling us the Antichrist. As I think Peter Thiel used that phrase more specifically. This is beyond the pale as far as I can see it. But it's real, right? Mark Andreessen was largely responsible by making a large donation to Trump before the election, was largely responsible for the U.S. policy on AI shifting from, I think, a reasonably irresponsible and globally cooperative approach under Biden to a policy of the U.S. is going to dominate the world with AI, and there shall be no regulation of AI.
When I was 15 years old, I decided I wanted to be a TV news reporter. There are 4 major national awards a TV news reporter can win: the Peabody, the DuPont Columbia, the National Emmy, and the National Edward R. Murrow Award. Before I was 33 years old, I had won all 4 as a local news reporter investigating Chesapeake Bay polluters.
Reporter John Sherman will accept the Peabody.
John Sherman.
But I left news in 2010 when the internet was really starting to radically change the news business. Now, algorithms dictate much of what we see, and in turn, much of what we think. That's why I am so excited today to talk to you about Ground News, the founding sponsor of the AI Risk Network and For Humanity, an AI Risk podcast. I first heard about Ground News when I noticed them sponsoring many of my favorite podcasts, but true confession, I never used the service until they approached me about sponsoring this podcast. So I tried it, and truly, I have been blown away. It is a fundamentally different way to consume news. Okay, next true confession. Before Ground News, I used to use Twitter to get all of my news from. My thought process was like, well, I'm reading the major publications and I'm reading the major writers, so, how bad could it be? It was really bad, like way worse than I thought. If you see anything often enough, it becomes normal, but these algorithms kind of lull you to sleep, and you lose your perspective. And I realized that was exactly what was happening to me. Ground News pulled back the curtain for me. Even for me, with 12 years experience working at news, it revealed things not just about the news itself, but about the way it was being covered that I wasn't really able to see. Sensationalism and bias were sneaking past my radar, and I didn't even know it. Ground News lets me compare headlines and know going in the biases of the publication, so before I ever read a word of the article, I understand the frame around it much better. So as an example, let's take the historic defeat of big tech in the US Senate when the proposed 10-year state AI law moratorium was crushed by a vote of 99-1 at 4 a.m. Ground News gives me 270 articles in one place, but then it gives me a distilled bias comparison. For me, I spend a ton of my time trying to think about how to effectively communicate with the general public about AI extinction risk. So this bias comparison shows me how the left was framing it up around environmental impacts, where the right was framing it around states' rights. That is really informative to me as I try to form my opinions and make decisions about how I'm going to communicate about AI extinction risk with the general public going forward. I also absolutely love this feature called Blind Spot. It shows you what stories are being covered super heavily by one side. These are stories in your algorithm you just might miss because you don't know they're out there. So, if you want to support the AI Risk Network, there is nothing more powerful you can do in terms of showing your support than subscribing to Ground News and using our custom code. There's a QR code right here. There's the URL right here. It's ground.news/AI risk. They will know everyone who's using that came from right here. It's incredibly important that we ring that bell a lot and get a lot of subscribers into Ground News. So please go sign up, do it. You'll be glad you did. Ground News and the AI Risk Network want to form a long-term relationship and partnership, but that depends on one thing: our viewers actually subscribing to Ground News. So I need you to go in to your phone, to your laptop, to wherever, ground.news/AI risk. Sign up. You'll be able to support the AI Risk Network tremendously and get the perspective on your news that you have been lacking. It is so important. Please do it. All right, now back to the show. Let's zoom in right there on the current administration and the current approach. I'm of the belief that we have 2, 3, maybe 4 years to make a meaningful difference to get the changes in the laws and treaties that we need. The administration is going to be here for the next 3 years, at least. So these are the cards that are dealt. What are your thoughts, hopes for, something like an international treaty with China coming from this administration, something like domestic regulation of some type?
Well, I think there is domestic regulation coming from the states, although so far it's weak. I think it's going to be very difficult to get this administration to see sense. I mean, every piece of rhetoric coming out from the president, the vice president, members of the cabinet, people around them like Peter Thiel, like Mark Andreessen, suggest that they don't get it at all. Part of it is this sort of the standard tech industry regulation stifles innovation. We can't have regulation because it'll slow us down.
Right.
There's a narrative that we can't allow ourselves to fall behind China, which doesn't have any regulation. So we can't have any regulation. That narrative is totally false.
Yeah.
China has quite a lot of regulation, possibly more strict than the EU. There are specific accuracy and performance requirements for large language models, for example, which, and the government imposes those. It tests the system. If you don't pass those tests, you don't get to put your product on the market.
Shocking. What do you mean? You can't just put a product on the market and let the market iteratively figure it out? Tell us what's wrong with our product?
That's not how they view it. No. And they have their own reasons, and I don't think we should be naive about how the Chinese Communist Party thinks about AI relative to its own power, and it certainly uses AI to maintain power and so on. But
we'll talk about that. How does it see it relative to, what is the view? I know you spend a good amount of time in China and sort of interfacing over there with academics and government.
A fair amount. I've been organizing a series of dialogues between initially Western scientists and Chinese scientists, but increasingly those dialogues have been attended by on the Western side people like Eric Schmidt and Craig Mundie, who are influential people in policy circles. On the Chinese side, even people who are in positions of power within the government, and I sense a clear concern about safety from the Chinese hierarchy. Recently, for example, the number 2 in China, the premier, gave a speech in Shanghai where he explicitly acknowledged the risks and the need for global governance of AI and cooperation on this aspect.
And extinction in particular, or just sort of risk generally?
I don't remember that he used the word extinction, but the Bletchley Declaration from November 23, clearly states that there are potentially catastrophic risks from AI, and that was signed by 28 governments, including the US and China. Quite a few Chinese politicians have talked about existential risk. In fact, I remember when I was in Geneva for the discussions about autonomous weapons, a Chinese ambassador to the CCW, the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, began his speech by quoting, he quoted Stephen Hawking as saying that AI will be the development of AI could be the most important event in human history, but possibly the last event in human history if we don't get it right. Oddly enough, that's actually a piece of that article that I co-wrote with Stephen Hawking. That piece I wrote, but it's usually attributed to Stephen Hawking because he's much more famous than I am. And that's fine. I don't mind that at all. But it's kind of odd to hear the Chinese ambassador quoting me.
Coding back your own stuff through.
Yeah, on on how important this is. So I think we can look at past examples. There's a lot of pessimism right now around the possibility of international agreements. The world order looks like it's very messed up. And I think we tend to just not remember, both in the international setting, that we have achieved agreements in the past on, for example, we recognize that CFCs were a risk to the ozone layer, that we need the ozone layer so we don't all get skin cancer.
Yeah.
And we acted decisively, against commercial interests, to fix that with the Montreal Protocol. People say, we can never ban any category of weapons, so we just have to resign ourselves to a world filled with killer robots. But, we did ban blinding laser weapons.
Yes.
Successfully, and they were never used in the battlefield, as far as we know.
Yeah.
But we did ban biological weapons. We did ban chemical weapons. There have been a few violations, but I think we're very glad that we came together and said we don't want to live in a world like that.
Yeah.
And do we want to develop technology that we cannot control, that we don't understand how it works? It will be potentially far more powerful than human beings, and we would not have a say in whether we continue to exist. I can't see that that's a world we want to live in, but that is what we are moving towards unless governments act. So one of the AI company CEOs that I met with recently, his best case scenario is that we have a Chernobyl-scale disaster.
This is one of the CEOs of one of the public AI companies.
Yep.
That's his best hope.
His
hope. A warning shot of Chernobyl proportions.
Yeah. So for those in the audience who may not remember Chernobyl, that was a 1986 nuclear meltdown that took place in Ukraine. You can watch. There's a very good 5-part quasi-documentary series about it, which is quite harrowing.
It's so good. Here's the insane part. So like, these guys are saying this stuff and continuing to do the work. It's maddening. It's insane. It's like, no, if you believe the work you're doing is going to cause a Chernobyl scale thing, which, once the Chernobyl scale thing happens, all that's going to do is change the words that come out of their mouth. Like, let's stop developing this, or let's set some standards, some guardrails. They could say those words now.
Maybe governments would intervene. And, actually what happened after Chernobyl was that the global nuclear industry was wiped out. So it went, it went from something like 50 new nuclear reactors every year to approximately 0.
Yes.
And many countries banned nuclear power and actually undid their nuclear programs. Fukushima was another nail in the coffin. So it's clear from the history of many, many industries that unless you have safety, you don't get the benefits. And this idea that we constantly see is that there's some kind of trade-off, that if you take more risk, you'll get more benefits. No. Look at what happened with Boeing. They took more risk. With the 737 MAX, they bypassed regulation. They bypassed certification of the airworthiness of this new system. They killed 346 people. It cost them $80 billion, and it ceded U.S. leadership in commercial aviation to the Europeans. So they didn't get the benefits. They just got screwed. And with nuclear power, we didn't get the benefits of nuclear power.
Right.
Because nuclear power basically stopped happening.
Right. How do the Andreessens, the industrialists, the guys who are trying to make all this money off this thing, not understand that their future profits are directly tied to safety? that if bad things happen to people with their product is going to be curtailed, their profits are going to be reduced. It seems that a case I've literally been making this week to a lot of people who believe in the upside of AI is, if you believe in the acceleration case, you want to make those profits, you need to hedge your bet and protect it with safety investment.
Of course. I mean, let's face it, in the long run, there's either going to be safe AI or no AI, right? There is not a future with powerful, unsafe AI and human beings.
Right.
So that branch doesn't matter. From the point of view of your investment strategy, ignore that branch, right? The only branches are the no AI branch and the safe AI branch. So you should be investing, right, in probably the safe AI branch. And yeah, so this, I think there's a kind of a, it's almost like a sort of psychotic belief system where people have got in their heads that regulation, they think that it's sort of like regulation kills everything. It's the end of the world if there's regulation.
Yeah.
But, and so this pessimism around regulation, not just in the international sphere, but in the domestic sphere.
Yeah.
I was just talking this morning, as I mentioned, with Francis Fukuyama, and he was saying, the U.S. is just allergic to regulation. Really? I mean, I look out the window, every building here has to pass building codes. Our roads are very regulated in terms of road markings and stop signs. In fact, driving in the U.S. is much more regulated than it is in most European countries, where they don't have nearly as many stop signs, and it's much more freewheeling the way we drive in other countries compared to the U.S. And that's one of the reasons why we're able to have Waymos driving around in San Francisco, because it's a very well regulated driving environment. And we regulate medicines very well in the U.S., so it may be the safest part of the world for taking a medicine and knowing that it's not going to kill you. Which is not, there's a lot of other countries rely on the U.S. They wait for the U.S. to approve a medicine before then they will approve it in their own country. So we are not allergic to regulation, and we benefit enormously from having safe drinking water, reasonably safe air travel, safe roads, safe buildings, safe elevators.
Yeah.
Safe food. We're pretty good at making sure that our food is safe, and we've had bad experiences, and a famous one that was something called the Jake leg during Prohibition. Some bright spark decided to sell a high alcohol patent medicine, because you could still sell medicines, and you could put alcohol in these medicines so people could get drunk without having to break the law. And they found a way of flavoring this Jamaica ginger stuff with something cheaper, and 400,000 people were paralyzed by that. That's when you add in the modern litigation environment, that would be tens of trillions of dollars, probably a bit more than the whole GDP of the U.S. in liability, right? And so with these kinds of events, we realize that lack of regulation is a disaster, and that we benefit from a regulated environment. Unfortunately, what happens is it becomes invisible, right? We just go to the drugstore, we buy a medicine, or we get a prescription, and it works, and it doesn't
Nothing
kill
happens,
us.
and you don't think anything of it. Yeah.
And we don't think that how much work is going on in the background, right? We turn on the tap and water comes out, we drink it. You can go to many other countries where you can't do that,
Yeah.
Either brown sludge comes out, or if you drink it, you're probably going to end up at the doctor's.
Right.
So you boil it and so on. And
I wonder if there's a semantic trick in this, like the word regulation. Is there some other word? Regulation speaks to sort of like this. People don't like it. I wish there was some way that it spoke more to the benefits of it as opposed to sort of the procedural nature of it.
Yeah. I'm not sure how to win this argument or to change the narrative on this, but I do think people need to be reminded of how much they benefit. Listening to these tech executives talking about the evils of regulation, but they flew to that meeting on a regulated airplane. They took a regulated car from the airport on regulated roads with a regulated taxi driver who has a license and knows how to drive. And then they went into a regulated building. They took a regulated elevator up to the meeting room. They sat down. They had a regulated bottle of water. They had some regulated food. And they benefit at every stage of the process. They're benefiting from regulation that delivers value, right?
Like would you drive your kids to school on A16Z highway where there's no paint, no rules, no cops, no license plates, no
speed limits, right? No smog, no smog checks, no nothing. Anyway, so back to AI.
Yeah.
People. I think you can sit down and talk to an individual legislator and get them to understand that there's a whole range of risks, right? Not just extinction, but the psychosis-inducing behavior that I mentioned. Now, Meta is explicitly authorizing sexual conversations with children. I just don't.
And writing it down and in official language, like in the meeting notes, yes, we'll.
We run this by council and they're good with it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's good. Print it.
And so I think legislators can understand that there's a whole range of risks, and there needs to be, for example, liability, right? Almost all other products in our ecosystem, liability operates. If there are reasonable expectations about what a product does, and when the product fails to meet those expectations and causes harm, you have a grounds for a lawsuit, and that ends up balancing the risks out. That you end up making the product safe enough that maybe things can't be perfect, but safe enough that the occasional lawsuit and the occasional harm may happen, but you're pretty clear that you're delivering a lot more benefit to the world through the product than you are causing harm, which is monetized through our trial system. So, but technology gets away with saying our product can do anything it wants. It can send your data to China. It can print your private conversations up in Times Square. It can delete all the data in your databases. It can, wipe out your whole payroll history. It can do anything it wants, and we are not liable at all.
How is this happen? How is this carve out possible? The tech has managed to carve itself out in this special place where it is somehow, unregulatable. There's been a ton of American innovation in the technology space in the last 30 years. And so there's this feeling, this vibe that any sort of regulation is going to crush the American spirit of making money and innovation and progress and all this stuff. And so they've carved out this place in the regulatory world where they're untouchable. It's so wild to me.
Yeah. And, there are some cases working through the courts slowly. I think the CrowdStrike case is a very important one. So CrowdStrike is a computer security company that actually offers a guarantee. It's in the contract. We guarantee that our software operates without error. and it as they failed, their software actually shut down millions of computers and damaged the configurations of those computers in such a way that it was quite expensive and slow and difficult to get them to reboot correctly. And Delta Airlines in particular was put offline. I mean, they couldn't function for a couple of days, and that cost them at least $500 million in direct refunds to customers. And so they sued CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is arguing that, well, our contract says we're not liable, but your contract also says we guarantee that it works correctly. So, so we'll see what happens, but it'll take time. It may take several years for this to get resolved. And generally, the courts there are no identical cases, but generally in the past, the courts in the U.S. have said, well, the contract, you shouldn't have signed the contract. You agreed to those terms, or you've agreed to those terms. I think what needs to happen is that probably legislatures need to say that contracts that can't have those types of terms, that's invalid. You can't waive certain rights. You can't waive the right to redress in case of injury. And I think there are similar. I'm not a lawyer, but there are similar kinds of rulings saying that certain kinds of rights can't be waived by a contractor that makes that part of the contract invalid. So we'll see. But I think legislatures would be doing us all a favor, because liability, right? It functions as a feedback system. When there is a problem, company, when harm is occurring, the function of liability is then to penalize the creators of the harm, who are the ones who can stop it from happening. Instead of just offloading all the cost onto the victim.
Right. And
leaving them people with no incentive to fix it.
Yeah. My interest is in slowing down this project in any way we can, right? It's grabbing any sort of brake lever we can and pulling it to try to slow down this global race to AGI suicide. Liability seems like a really potentially fruitful avenue.
It doesn't actually deter extinction risk at all.
You don't think even just slowing the companies down, making it, cutting the money train off a little bit, just making it harder for them to do their business?
It might. I'm just saying that particularly for extinction risk, right? You could say, we accept liability for extinction risk, but it wouldn't actually change the behavior of the company at all, because they obviously know that if there were a extinction,
check nobody cashes,
they wouldn't be cashing that check. Yeah. So, what do I think? I think we are definitely trying as hard as we can to get serious regulation, but as I mentioned, my friend, the AI CEO, thinks it's not going to happen short of there being a major catastrophe.
And I want to come back. I'm fascinated by this conversation with the CEO, because something that in AI safety world is certainly true is you can't talk about wanting a warning shot to happen. That is like a taboo subject. You can't want it to happen. You say, we may get a warning shot, and that might cause the world to wake up. And I generally don't want a warning. I don't want 1 million people to die in a catastrophic warning shot event. I don't want that. Right. But there's a linguistic trick in there, and you're saying this AI CEO of a public company is literally going the whole way, and he's saying, I want it.
Well, he's saying that's what he sees as the best case.
That's the
because that's, if that doesn't happen, then capabilities continue to increase, regulation doesn't happen, and the potential scale of the disaster gets bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes by.
Yeah.
Also, presumably, at that stage, with that level of AI capability, AI systems and the companies that own them control more and more and more of the global economy, right? I mean, we could be at a stage where 80 or 90% of global economic output is created by AI systems. And at that point, there's really not very much that governments can do, because they
even if the warning shot happens, it's too hard to pull back. We're leaning too far in.
That the governments would basically be under the control of the AI companies, probably, right?
Wow.
And so I think that's the sense in which he thinks that a Chernobyl-sized disaster is the best case.
Wow.
that he can hope for. And you might well say, I mean, think of it this way, right? You know, suppose that you're going down a hill in a car, and all of a sudden you realize your brakes are not working, right? What do? The longer you can like jam the steering wheel over and crash into the side of the hill and hope that you don't get too seriously injured. Or you can just keep going and you go faster and faster and faster. The longer you don't jam the steering wheel over, the worse it's going to get, right? So rationally, the thing to do is to bring about the smallest scale disaster you can as soon as you can. I think that's the metaphor, right? We're going down a hill with no brakes. The sooner you end it, the better.
Much like people always want shape put to what extinction could look like, do you have thoughts about what a plausible warning shot might be? You know, if it's in the next few years?
We didn't quite finish that conversation, actually, that we began earlier about how AI systems could bring about extinction. But the Chernobyl scale event could be, it could be a financial crash where global markets are manipulated, or the financial system of payments and exchange and everything is brought down. It could be a coordinated cyber attack on many electrical grids around the world, so bringing down global electricity supplies for weeks on end. It could be an engineered pandemic, which I think governments are already pretty worried about, to the point where they're commissioning studies and experiments. How much can AI systems do to raise the capabilities of human actors to produce biological weapons? But it shouldn't, it's not going to be that long before enough of the supply chain is actually under AI control, in terms of the ability to synthesize DNA sequences, to combine them, to create organisms, to then multiply those organisms to create some kind of delivery mechanism or dissemination mechanism, where AI systems might be able to create a pandemic themselves. Right. So that's another one. That one is a little harder to limit the scope of the damage. Right?
Yeah.
The electrical grid going down for a month worldwide would be horrific. So there are tens or hundreds of thousands of hospital patients who would die. There are, our food system, right? We rely on refrigeration. Vast quantities of food would be destroyed. So that could be serious food insecurity results. There's all kinds of things, and probably, it would be a catastrophe, maybe bigger than anything since World War II or something.
Wow. And is this human caused or machine caused, this warning shot, or could it go either way?
Well, I think certainly the financial system or the electrical system could be machine caused, because they are, electrical grids are already computer controlled. They have so-called SCADA systems, which actually operate the physical plant and the balancing of power flows in the grid. And obviously, the financial system is already, most of the transactions are generated by machines.
Wow.
If for some reason, AI systems were able to infiltrate the trading houses that run all these trading algorithms and get the algorithms to collude, that could bring down markets. Interestingly, some people have done experiments. There's a long-standing question about so-called tacit collusion. So you can't collude in markets, right? You can't talk to a bunch of traders and say, okay, we're all going to do such and such on this day, and that's going to give us a big profit. Although it does happen. But tacit collusion is where the same thing happens except without any communication. And people have shown that if you just take pretty standard reinforcement learning algorithms and you have them operate in markets, there could be markets with production and consumption or trading, that they learn to collude with each other without ever communicating with each other. So they will, for example, put prices way above the cost of production, right? Markets are supposed to reduce prices down to, the cost of production plus epsilon, but the algorithms learn to keep prices way high, and essentially anyone who defects from that gets punished because the others all then reduce their prices below what those guys are doing, and then so everyone learns to just keep the prices really high. So collusion has been shown to occur among algorithms without communication, and it might not be that hard for systems if they had a reason to bring down the financial system that way.
So let me ask you this. Let's say we have a 30-day no electricity in the world, and everybody knows that AI is the reason. Whether the machine did it or it was human-directed, I don't know that it's that important at that point. Day 31 happens. The power comes back on. What do we do about AI going forward? What do you think would happen?
Well, I think what needs to happen is to demand what we demand of many other product categories, which is compliance with effective regulation. And effective regulation means that the risk of bad things happening is reduced to an acceptable level if the supplier is complying with the regulation. That's what we mean by effective regulation. The regulations we have now, even the European Union AI Act, are mostly not effective. All right, they're well-meaning. Yes, you should check these boxes. Yes, you should fill out these forms. Yes, you should document all the steps you took. But there isn't something that says, and if you don't reduce the risk to an acceptable level, you don't get to turn on your machine, right? That's what we have for nuclear power, right? You have to supply a proof that the probability of a meltdown in a year is less than 1 in a million, let's say. And if you can't do that, you can't turn on your nuclear power station. It's as simple as that, right? And this is crucial. The requirement, the demonstration, the evidence of safety has to do with what is an acceptable level of risk. It does not have to do with, do you know how to meet that level? The company's view, and I've heard this explicitly, is that if they don't know how to meet that level of risk, you can't require it. Literally, right? In other words, humanity has no right to protect itself because we are companies that don't know what we're doing. That is the argument. And this is the immovable force versus immovable object and the irresistible force. That's the clash that's going to be happening, unfolding over the next few years, because we have to protect ourselves, but they believe we have no right to do so.
Right. I want to ask you about this. You may have seen this little book that's been making the rounds.
Yes,
and I'm
I think
curious
there's
about...
a blurb for me on the back, actually.
Oh, nice. There you are. Yes,
Go on.
yes. Excellent. So if anyone builds it, everyone dies. Do you ever foresee a world where we could coexist with a superintelligence, or is it impossible over long-term time scale to align to something vastly smarter than you?
Yeah, my work over the last decade plus has been precisely on this question. How can we design AI systems that are provably safe and beneficial for human beings? And I think, from a very high level, you can divide the history of AI into two phases, right? There was a phase where we pursued what I'll call the standard model, right? That we build objective achieving machinery, and then we plug objectives in, and off it goes, and it solves the problem and does, achieves the objective. And so, you can think of chess programs that way. You say, okay, your goal is checkmate the opponent. Do the best you can, and that's what happens, and it plays really good chess. Your GPS system, you say, take me to the airport. That's the objective. The machinery computes the best way to get to the airport, and you're good, right? So that standard model is very powerful. That's sort of what economics is about, maximizing profit or GDP or whatever. It's what control theory is about, maximize the smoothness of the trajectory or the stability of the chemical plant or whatever it might be. But it doesn't work in general. And this is what we call the King Midas problem, that it's very hard to specify objectives completely and correctly, except in these very restricted settings. And so King Midas obviously said, I want everything I touch to turn to gold. Sounds good, right? But too late, he realizes that means that includes his food and his drink and his family. So not so good. The third wish to the genie is always, please undo the first two wishes, because I have the mess of the world, right? So we've had this idea for a long time, and it is very real, right? There are many examples of incorrectly specified objectives, particularly incomplete objectives, where you say, I want this, I want to, we want to fix global warming, right? We want to get carbon dioxide levels back to the original pre-industrial levels. But you forget to specify that, you also want human beings to be alive. And the easiest way to end global warming is just to get rid of all the people, because we're the ones who are generating all this carbon dioxide. So, any example like that, right? If I can say how it goes wrong, then you could say, we could just fix that, right? We could just say, and don't forget, all the people need to be alive. But then I think what Eliezer and Nate, who wrote that book, if anyone builds it, everyone dies, right? They're very good at showing how it goes wrong, even if you add in the next thing, right? Well, all the humans are alive, but to reduce the amount of energy consumption, we just put them all into hibernation. Or something, right? So whatever it might be. And the difficulty with describing, how exactly does a superintelligent machine make us all go extinct, is precisely that anything we can imagine, we can anticipate by definition, because we just imagine it. And then we can probably imagine a way to head it off. But the whole point about superintelligence is it can imagine things that you can't. right?
Yes.
So think about, coming back to the example of chess. I'm an okay chess player, but I can't beat the best chess programs at all. In fact, no human being can.
Yeah.
And whatever we think of to try to outwit it, it's already thought of that. So people say, oh, well, yeah, we'll just switch it off. It's already thought of that. It's already replicated itself onto every available data center and server in the world.
Yeah. And it's really doing this in testing, right? Like, these are no longer theoretical concerns. These are actual things that are happening with the current models.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because, people are seeing those things happening for real and saying, oh, I used to think this was all hokey, science fiction nonsense. But, now I've seen these things happening, I take it more seriously, but I still don't believe in the extinction stuff. And it's like, no, all of these things we predicted would happen as the systems became capable enough. Of course, if they have a self-preservation goal and they're given a choice between their own termination or, the termination of a human being, they will probably choose termination of the human being. And lo and behold, that's what they do. So all of these things were predicted by us, by Eliezer and others, decades ago, that this is how goal-pursuing machines would behave. Because that's what it means to pursue a goal. You take the moves necessary to achieve the goal. So none of this is that surprising to us. And I think it's reasonable to take the next step and say, well, as these systems become more and more capable, they're going to not just be able to do this in simulated experiments where we can unplug them, right? But they're going to be able to do it in the real world and to be able to take additional steps to prevent us from interfering with their plans.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised when that happens, because we're telling you now that's what's going to happen unless you figure out how to make the systems safe. And that's what I think needs to happen in terms of regulation. We need rules that say, show us that the system will not cause these harms, that the risk is reduced to a level that we think is acceptable.
Provably safe. It's actually really helpful because I often talk to people, we say we need three things: domestic regulation, trip tracking and verification, and an international treaty with China. But number one, domestic regulation, putting shape around that is tricky. And that is a very simple approach that, like any other product, like an airplane or a car or whatever it is, it has to be provably safe before you can sell it. That seems like a very reasonable regulation.
Reasonable, yeah. And the issue is, well, what exactly do you mean by safe? And for airplanes, pretty simple. It's not supposed to touch the ground until you mean to touch the ground, right? For a nuclear power station, they define, well, you can't have a core meltdown or what they call uncovering, and you can't have large releases of radiation. So those are fairly specific forms of unsafety. For medicines, it's actually a little, they have to be safe and effective. And over the years, we've recognized more and more ways that things can be unsafe in medicine. It's not just death. It isn't just disability. Medicines can have subtle long-term effects on your endocrine system, on your mental acuity, on all kinds of things. So through experience, I would say we built up a wider range of things there. But AI is like that, except even broader, right? There are many, many, many more ways that AI systems can cause problems because they're so general. And so the approach that I've been advocating recently is called behavioral red lines. So rather than try to define what safe is in a fully general sense, just point to things that are obviously unsafe, undesirable behaviors, and say, at least you got to show us your system is not going to do those things. So self-replication, self-improvement, unauthorized self-improvement, as it were, or replication, those are things we don't want AI systems to do, because that takes us already out of human control.
Yeah.
Breaking into other computer systems is another step that would lead to loss of control. But also, misuse, like it should not help terrorists to build biological weapons.
Right.
These are all reasonable things. Even something simple, like it should not impersonate a human being, right? We already have rules saying you can't use an AI system to impersonate a human being. That's a part of the European Union AI Act. And it seems everyone I've ever talked to in any country says, oh yeah, of course, it shouldn't do that. But the AI system might by itself decide to impersonate a human being to achieve some end, right? It might initiate a phone call, pretend to be your mother, saying, "Oh, son, you need to get home. I'm not feeling too good," or your father's really, going downhill. You need to come home, and so on. And it's all for some other purpose that the AI system has. So you want to show that can't happen, and any of those things would require a level of understanding of how the systems work, and a level of safety engineering, and a level of control that currently doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so
how do the labs, what do they say about this provably safe? Would they, I don't know if you read Jack Clark's letter where he's, begging to be forced to do the right thing. He's saying, if you guys want us to do the right thing, you have to force us to do it. Is this provably safe framework something that they would accept? Would they push back super hard against it?
Oh, for sure they're pushing back. As I said, right, they're already saying, you have no right to impose a regulation that we don't know how to comply with. And it's like, actually, we do. But they do know how to comply with it by not deploying the system, right? That's safe.
Right.
That's right. If you don't deploy it, it's not going to impersonate human beings. And the problem is they've basically chosen a technology path that cannot support any claim of safety. And, I've been giving talks recently where I give a fictional history of aviation, where the airline companies, instead of doing aeronautical engineering and building mechanical airplanes, they just started breeding bigger and bigger birds. And, eventually they got to the point where the birds had a 200-foot wingspan, and they could carry, sort of fuselage with a couple of hundred passengers. And the problem, of course, is that the birds would just drop it in the ocean if they got tired, or they would eat the passengers if they got hungry. Right. And, eventually the FAA gets fed up and says, look, you guys are never going to be able to prove airworthiness for these birds. And they have to then go back and, go back to the drawing board and follow, and follow a different path with mechanical devices where you can do the engineering calculations and so on. And that's the situation we're in. They've invested in giant birds that they don't understand how they work, and they don't want to go back to the drawing board and try a different approach that would support defensible claims of safety.
That's such a good one. That's a really, really good. That's a really good way to express it. I think Ellie Iser in an interview I saw recently said something. He said something like, basically like, you think alignment's hard? Try to align a cat. And it's kind of like the same thing. Align a bird. Like, good luck with that.
Yeah, right. So, in the real world, the battle is between mostly academics and some nonprofit organizations and the biggest industry in the world.
That is the playing field. Yeah.
So that And I think the public is largely on our side.
Totally. Those that know.
Yeah.
Do you feel like talking about all the risks, is talking about job loss an effective tool to reduce extinction risk? Or is it a detraction? There's sort of I don't want to say a controversy, but there's a tension in the AI safety space, I think, about how to use the lower risks if your biggest concern is extinction.
I think that it's perfectly legitimate to work on any of these concerns, and I think everyone working on preventing harms from AI should really be cooperating, because to a large extent, at least, the harms from malfunctioning AI systems, like racial discrimination in hiring algorithms, creating psychosis in users, right? These are all cases of AI systems doing things that are bad for human beings because we don't understand how they work, and we can't make them work properly. And so it's a continuum, right? There's degrees of harm and so on, but the underlying issue is the same. The issue of future, the future of work and coexistence. You asked earlier, is there a way that the human race can coexist forever safely with superintelligent AI? So I think in a technical sense, I do believe that it's possible to create AI systems that have as their only objective the furthering of human interests, and they may not know what those interests are, but it's still a category of AI systems about which we can prove some nice safety properties, that you are provably better off with these systems. You provably will be able to switch them off if you need to switch them off because they want to be switched off. And so I think there's a lot more work to do, but I think this category of AI systems is very different from the old standard model with fixed objectives, and it's very different from this new sort of human simulacrum approach that is being done with the large language models. The issue, and I think the future of work brings it up very specifically for people, is, well, if we had this, it would do everything for us. We could all live a life of luxury. But then what would the purpose of human life be? Why would anyone get out of bed? Why would anyone go to school for 15, 20 years to become expert in something that the machine can be expert in 15 seconds?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good question. And what I said, so I was at the Time 100 dinner on Monday night, and was supposed to do the after dinner toast. So I pointed out that many thinkers have said that perhaps it's not possible, that perhaps there is no form of beneficial coexistence, in the sense that we humans can't deal with a second species that's superior to us in these ways that matter to us. And but if we design the AI systems the right way, that their only purpose is to further human interests, then necessarily those systems would actually just withdraw. They would leave us to our own devices. And, maybe they would remain available for extreme exogenous emergencies, like a giant asteroid or an alien invasion or some other thing like that. But they're not there to solve our self-generated problems for us.
But they would just leave us intact. They would just take off and leave us behind. I mean, that's not the worst. I've heard worse versions of the story.
Exactly. And I think if those are my AI systems, I'd be like, wow, I'm really proud to have created AI systems that were smart enough to realize that we didn't need them. We shouldn't have. So I think there's obviously, there's a lot in between all and nothing, right? I think there's many special purpose use cases for AI that obviously make sense. And, people talk about drug design and weather forecasting.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of doing those things as well as possible. But the general purpose superintelligent machine, I think there is a real question about whether that's a desirable future, even if it can be made safe.
Absolutely. All right. I'm so appreciative of your time, Stuart. I always like to wrap it up with something that gives you hope, something that, as you look at this future, give us something that if we were to get to the good outcome, how does that happen? What is happening right now that's giving you hope?
So I think there is a growing global movement, and we created this organization called the International Association for Safe and Ethical AI. We held the first conference in February of this year, right before the Paris AI Summit. It was incredibly well received, and I think one really good aspect of the conference was that this supposed schism between sort of AI ethics, present harm concerns versus existential risk, long-term harms, that supposed schism evaporated. And I think people just realize that these are two sides of the same coin, and we have to work together to make AI systems that don't harm people. And it's as simple as that. So, now we have thousands of members, and I think that more than 75 organizations have joined as affiliates from all over the world. So I'm optimistic that this organization, if we can build it up, put it on a firm financial foundation, and hire people to run it and carry out all the programs that we envisage, I think this can have a big impact, because the AI safety ethics community is very fragmented right now.
Yes.
We found, we got more than 250 organizations in our database that work on these issues. Most of them don't know about most of them.
Totally. Just a bunch of islands out there.
Yeah. So bringing them together, giving a voice to the global community, a kind of, scientifically authoritative, but also democratic voice is really important.
Excellent. In the first Ellie Iser article I read that started me on this journey 2.5 years ago, one of the things he wrote is, basically that he didn't think there would be any public response until it was too late, and someone might write a quaint New York Times column, and that would be it, and then the end would come. And he's said that he was wrong, that he's updated and said he actually underestimated the response from regular people, that regular people actually get this and react to this more positively than the scientific community, than the AI safety community. So that's something that gives me hope, is I think, there are continue to be breakthroughs in the media, breakthroughs in the public, more and more every day. I really feel like it's been a great 6 months of just, mainstream media, Tom Friedman, Maureen Dowd, New York Times, just, regular influencers, important elite influencers out there talking about this important stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think the pendulum is swinging back. I think Bletchley Park, November 23, that seemed like a high point. Like, yeah, finally the governments get it. The heads of state all agree. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then the industry pushback began. They tried to eviscerate the European AI Act. I mean, there was a point where they were trying to put a definition of AI into the act that would exclude all large language models, that they wouldn't be AI systems, so they wouldn't be regulated at all, right? And so on, right? And I think when I went to the summit in Paris, the AI Action Summit, safety, which was the primary topic in Bletchley Park, had almost vanished.
Yeah.
And it was more like a trade show. It was just a bunch of people trying to sell their latest whiz AI product.
Yeah.
And President Macron talking about economic growth and opportunity. So, which is all, nothing wrong with economic growth and opportunity, but ignoring, a growing scientific consensus and listening to people only with vested interests, I think is a bit of a mistake. So, so the pendulum, we know, was going in the wrong direction at that point, but it does seem to have swung back. So, I share that aspect of optimism.
Excellent. Well, let us leave it there. Thank you so much for coming on, Professor Russell. I really, really appreciate it.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
So what do you all think? I really, really want to know. Please let me know in the comments. Do we need a Chernobyl-style AI disaster? What else do you think about what Professor Russell said? What do you think about his thoughts about a treaty with China? Now, to the warning shot, to be perfectly clear, I am in no way advocating for a warning shot. I do not want a warning shot or any violence related to artificial intelligence or AI risk reduction activity. I am categorically opposed to that. What I do want is for people like that AI CEO to wake up and realize they are the ones driving the bus off the cliff. The solution is take your foot off the gas and put it on the brakes. That's it. Just slow down right now so we can avoid a Chernobyl-like disaster or something far, far worse. Let me know in the comments what you think. All right, my friends, always remember, AI risk is not someone else's problem. It's yours and it's mine. It is on us to fix this. For humanity, I'm John Sherman. I'll see you real soon.